O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and made you into races and tribes, so that you may identify one another. Surely the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is the most pious of you. This was taken from chapter 49, line 13 of the Quran. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against the sons of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. This was taken from the Hebrew Bible, Leviticus chapter 19, line 18, and which was repeated again in the New Testament of Matthew chapter 22, line 39. The second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Cherry, plum, peach, or damson blossoms, all just as they are entities to possessing their own unique qualities. This is by the Buddha. So we currently live in a connected world beyond the cars, trains, ships, and airplanes. We are connected globally through the internet all the time. When used correctly and positively, our ability to leverage on our network and connectedness can help to build good relationships, foster positive communities, and bring about better understanding and acceptance between individuals of different cultural and religious backgrounds. But when used incorrectly and negatively, we stir misunderstandings, misconceptions, and an inevitable feeling of resentment and hate, which spreads faster than anything good. Rarely do we see good and positive things go viral. Most of the things that spread like wildfire are stories of negativity, hate, and resentment. So let me give you a bit of statistics about Singapore first. In 2010, the Singapore Department of Statistics had the following numbers on the resident youth population aged between 15 to 34 years of age. Number of youths at that point of time stood at 1.08 million out of a total resident of 3.77 million residents. And the total population for that year was 5.07 million. And by residents, it means permanent residents and Singapore citizens. And out of these numbers, 71.5% were Chinese, 14.8% Malays, 10.2% Indian, and the remaining 3.5% made up the rest of the ethnicities. 30.6% were Buddhists, 18.4% Christians, 7.4% Hindus, 14.5% Muslims, 8.7% Taoists, 0.6% made up the other religions, and 19.9% had no religion. And a year later, in 2011, while the number of youths stood at 1.07 million out of a total resident population of 3.78 million, the total population in Singapore had increased from 5.07 to 5.18 million. And while the numbers have not changed, we see a significant increase in the number of immigrants coming to live, work, and play in Singapore. And they share a common space together with us, all of us here. So what does this mean? It simply means that we are becoming even more culturally diverse in Singapore, where the society that we live in are no longer just ethnically diverse, but we are also growing in cultural diversity. And when I mean ethnicity, it means what we are used to labeling ourselves as Chinese, Malay, Indians, Eurasians, and by culture it would include the norms, your social norms from where you come from. A Singaporean Malay is very different from a Malaysian Malay as opposed to an Indonesian and a Bruneian Malay in terms of our cultural norms. We probably share the same similarity in terms of language, in religious beliefs, but cultural practices are different. And one will not be able to understand or accept the differences until one has met, lived with, or has forged a deep connection with the other, to be able to hold your first judgment in order for you to learn. And Stephen Covey sums this up very nicely in his Habits of Highly Successful People. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, which simply means you do not force onto others your opinion, but instead exercise compassion first to have an understanding of the other before you actually present your own. And in 2008, I witnessed and experienced firsthand a Muslim wedding in Brunei. I was the best man to my roommate, whom I spent living close to 53 days with, on a Japan-ASEAN Youth Exchange Program, also called SEAP, or Ship for Southeast Asian Youth Program. And on this program, I traveled together with about 300 other youths from 11 countries on board a cruise ship to 5 different ports of call. So it's a very interesting youth program, and I'm sure all of you will be excited to know as well a little bit more about that program. But But besides Malay being the common language between Singapore and Brunei, Bruneians use a different kind of Malay to speak, one which still today I think a lot of us still struggle to understand. And despite sharing the same beliefs, Islam, there are major cultural differences in how Bruneians and Singapore Muslims get married. At the solemnization, there were 4 candles placed around where the groom would sit. Now, this was never observed anywhere in Singapore, not in the many years of my life that I've attended to a lot of Muslim weddings. So I decided to ask a friend of mine, so what was the purpose of these 4 candles? And they told me the purpose is to ward off evil spirits. Okay? Now, mind you, I'm a Muslim myself, so it came as a surprise for me, okay? Number 2, after the couple had been solemnized, the best man, meaning me, I had to put on the groom's clothes. So whatever the groom was wearing, if he was still perspiring wet, I had to put it on. Okay? So that was the second difference. I don't think any Muslim weddings here the groom will wear something and say, nah, wear this. None. And the last one, when you arrive at the bride's house, the groom will go in circles in front of the bride's house several times. And the best man had to follow him. And if my memory serves me correctly, apparently what happens is that if the groom should die during that walk, the best man will take his place. Yeah, so I would get married to my friend's wife instead. Okay, so it's still baffling for me to try to understand the logic and relevance behind that cultural practice, given that they are Muslims, just like myself. But I've learned to accept and understand the uniqueness of what it means to be a Bruneian Muslim and what it means to be a Singaporean Muslim. And I mentioned earlier on that we live in a connected world through the internet, but did you know that 77.2% of Singaporeans are connected online? 82% of us are on social networking sites, and the top page views is Facebook at 74.8% or 2.7 billion page views. And Singaporeans also tend to spend an average of about 38.46 minutes on Facebook, ranked number 3 in Asia in the growth of internet users and highest ranked in Southeast Asian region as of 2009. So what is the relevance and importance of this internet, especially how we conduct ourselves on social networking sites within what we perceive as our private domains? Now I'm sure all of us here, we read and share a lot of articles online like Yahoo, the Online Citizen, TR Emeritus, Thought Catalog. But most importantly, we also tend to share status updates of one another. And your profile may be personal, but your friend's profile may not be personal. And this is how, I think for most of you who remember, how Anton Casey and Amy Chong got themselves into trouble. And for those who are unaware, Anton Casey is of course our most recent high-profile case whereby a British expatriate married with a child to one of Singapore's many Miss Singapore, and his case clearly shows a lack of cultural understanding and the cultural norms of Singaporeans, as well as a lack of good judgment on his part. So he uploaded 3 photographs. The first one, a photo of his son in the MRT with the caption, "Daddy, where is your car? And who are all these poor people?" The second photograph was with his son in the car with the caption, "Reunited with my baby. Normal service can resume once I have washed the stench of public transport off me. FFS." And the last one, a photograph of a cab driver with the caption, "And today's Cabby Retard Award goes to Mr. Arm Warmer's stripy mittens and towel on the lap man. After all, it's only 37 degrees outside." So the story actually ends with him trying to change his and his wife's Facebook account, which failed terribly, and then after that they decided to leave Singapore to a place where no one knows where he is right now. Okay, and the story with Amy Chong is also a bit similar, with the exception that instead of photographs, her status update was the one that went viral. People started sharing them. And I quote from her, "Void deck weddings should be banned. If you can't afford a proper wedding, then you shouldn't be getting married, full stop." And it continues to go with, pardon the language, how many fucking days do Malay weddings at void deck go on for? Fuck, pay for a real wedding, you asshole. Maybe then the divorce rate won't be so high. How can society allow people to get married for 50 bucks, KNS, unquote. Okay, so within a few hours of her post going viral, she was all over the internet issuing apologies, trying to make amends, but it was just way too late because within 24 hours, she was sacked from her position as Assistant Director at NTUC and had also left Singapore. Now these are perhaps the 2 most severe cases involving a lack of cultural understanding, which we have observed in recent years. But there have also been others that have been committed in Singapore, some less popular than the previous two examples. If you can recall, there was another one whereby there was this guy who decided to take a photograph of kindergarten students from Al-Huda kindergarten and then uploaded and said a bus full of terrorists. Okay? But what is most important is that in this world of connectedness, there no longer exists a private space. Your private space can be sabotaged by your friend who does not agree with what you say, which is because it may be deemed to be insensitive. And what you decide to do in your personal space will affect what happens to you in your working life. And while a lot of Singaporeans have gotten away with it, it is surely the clearest indication to me that we have lost all or much of our ability to show sensitivity, to refrain from doing certain activities. It is also an indication that we will only show sensitivity in the public sphere, but are never personally compassionate ourselves. And the call for tolerance in Singapore has fallen on deaf ears in the private space, but it continues to provide a beautiful facade for those who believe in Singapore's ability to accommodate to the growing cultural differences living and expanding in Singapore. But this is not only a problem that we face in Singapore, it is actually a problem seen in other parts of the world. Now, when I arrived in August last year at the University of California, Irvine, to do my fellowship, the first thing that my supervisor shared with me was that the cultural differences and the lack of understanding on campus, which had given forth to one of the biggest problems on campus that year. In the spring quarter of 2013, an Asian American fraternity decided to put up a music video of Suit and Tie by Justin Timberlake featuring Jay-Z. And because all of them in the fraternity were Asian, they decided that they would give one of their members a blackface. Now, blackface is very uncommon in Singapore. None of us have actually done it. None of us actually probably know about the history behind blackface. Okay, but that video went viral and caused a lot of unhappiness among the Black Student Union, as well as the Black student community, as well as others who were more culturally aware of the negative connotations attached to being blackface. The fraternity issued an apology and subsequently decided to suspend itself voluntarily until fall 2014. And most people would have thought that they would have understood why it was insensitive and unacceptable by the black community, but it proved otherwise. At an event discussing on race organized by the Student Affairs Department, some of the black students demanded to question if the Asian fraternity had understood the reason why they had apologized. And much to the surprise of everyone in that room, they understood why they needed to apologize, but did not understand the reasons behind why they needed to. There's a big difference. Why they wanted to and why they needed to. Okay, but it was a good lesson for the fraternity and everyone in that room, and I hope in this room as well, for you to learn that when you commit something wrong, it is important for you to understand why it was wrong and not simply apologize because it was the right thing to do. So you apologize not to appease, but because you understand why. And because when you apologize because it was the right thing to do, you are only trying to appease the situation, and there's a likelihood that you will re-offend. And without an understanding of the situation, you haven't actually learned anything and may not have grown any wiser. So a survey by Hayes, the world's leading recruiting expert in qualified, professional and skilled people, on 250 HR and hiring managers, found that Japanese employers were seeking multilingual, flexible personnel. In short, they wanted to hire candidates with a global mindset to confront the global marketplace in this survey. 58% said that they needed these skills in order to effectively manage relationships between the Japan office and overseas partners, vendors and branch locations. However, 82% said that they found it extremely difficult or somewhat difficult to source that personnel that met their needs. And when asked what method they were using to train staff or develop a global mindset within their organization, 52% said that they were doing nothing in particular. And according to Hayes, candidates can take measures to develop their global mindset. Candidates with business level English are now highly regarded by employers, so it's important for candidates to brush up on your language skills or consider working abroad where you can not only improve on your English language skills, but learn about the different cultures firsthand. This will allow you to demonstrate to your potential employers in Japan you are flexible in your approach to work, which is another valuable trait that employers are now searching for. And the survey defines someone with a global mindset in order of importance into three things. The first one, Possessing advanced foreign language skills, particularly in English. Number 2, interested in and able to adapt to different cultures. And last but not least, flexible and able to accommodate to a difference of opinion. Now, as someone who runs a company myself, as an employer, looking to expand into the Malaysian and Indonesian market, I would definitely want to recruit someone who understands the local culture and the lingo of Malaysia and Indonesia. I've conducted workshops and been involved in several programs in Malaysia, and I can assure you that the culture, even as near as Johor Bahru, when compared to the culture in Kuala Lumpur, is very different. What more when you compare it with Singapore? Okay, so with Singapore being such a small market, but a big player on the international business scene, I feel that it is important for youths like yourself who are entering the global marketplace to not only be consciously aware of who you are culturally and religiously, but also be flexible, understanding and accepting of the differences that you will encounter. Okay, especially for those of you who may harbor plans to work or study abroad in Europe or in the US, you will encounter these major differences as well. In California, I can assure you that the working culture there is less organized and takes on a more relaxed approach. And for Singaporeans who may be working in California, you may find that as a shock because we are so used to the regimentation and the quick-paced lifestyle. But the culture in California, when you compare it to Washington, is different as well. In Washington, the culture is you have to stick to the dot. When they say 12 p.m., they will start at 12 p.m. and they expect you to report at 12 p.m. itself, no more, no less. And buses in California, where I was at, in Irvine, they only came once every hour. So I think it's going to be a huge problem for a lot of us here because we are so used to getting buses coming on time. And the buses stop operating on 10 p.m. on weekdays and 6 p.m. on weekends, which means there is no nightlife for you unless you have a car. Okay, so one of the first few things that I did when I first arrived and was introduced to the students that I was going to be working with was to spend as much time as possible with them to achieve 3 things. The first one, to understand the local culture. Number 2, to understand the local lingo. And number 3, to build a good relationship with them. And these are 3 important things which I hope you will take with you as well when you begin working. And it takes time and effort for you to build in it. And in building relationships, I learned that just as it was important to have a cultural exchange, it was just as important to understand and be confident of my own beliefs and values, which is my faith. As a Muslim, my beliefs and values are heavily influenced by Islam, which is then translated into my attitude and my behavior. And just as I've had cultural exchange, having an exchange of understanding on my religion also played a big part in communicating with others about who I was and what I stood for. Now, as a human, we are constantly hungry and in search for knowledge, and we cannot claim to ever be sufficient in knowledge or experience. Being consciously aware of who we are, our values and beliefs, and communicating them with others is also a skill that we need to learn. Because none of us grew up being adept at learning how to be sensitive or asking questions or giving opinions, but we learn how to, either through our failed experiences or through the wisdom of others. When I was a student, just like yourself, I was often involved in heated discussions or conversations with my friends. And most of the time, someone will definitely walk off in anger, or they'll just storm or go home feeling dissatisfied. And the reason is because I was highly opinionated and was extremely insensitive at how I chose to communicate my messages. And I safe to say I had a reputation here. I was popular for being someone very direct with my words, but lacked the tact, which is a skill that I still try to learn and improve on. But I was respected for my ability to not sieve my words. Unfortunately, I wasn't the best person anyone wanted to look for when they were not in a good mood or needed a little bit of cheering up. So my circle of friends was quite small. It was large, but the really close ones were only those who really knew me really, really well. Okay, but today I've learned to put that to good use. I'm a judge and a critic for drama and public speaking competitions. And I am also a shrink for many of my friends who need a direct and honest opinion to the problems that they face. And I even decided to come up with this service where I call Friends of Up. So anytime they have a problem, they can just give me a call, I'll hang out with them, sit down and help them to reassess and reevaluate their life as well as their problems. And like how many of you, and like Many of you here would wonder how your life would be like 5 to 10 years from now, which is a common question that many employers will ask. I ask the same question of you, but on the state of Singapore and Singaporeans in being understanding and accepting of the different cultures and faiths that continue to grow and plant their roots here. These days, I think my biggest concern is with Storm and the subsequent online chatter that I read when things are posted up. A lot of people seem to enjoy to storm so much, but they don't realize that when they give the caption without the full information, they create a new context for others. And the online chatter, when it comes to foreign workers, is almost always racist. Okay, so living in a small country like Singapore, we need to be extra cautious and conscious of our actions all the time. The words we speak, the photos and captions we choose to upload online will affect the society and this country. What we do have is, of course, the potential to shake the country up socially, and thus we need to ensure that we apply sensitivity with an understanding of the different faiths and cultures. Yes, I'm asking you to shake this country up, but please shake it positively. Steer it towards the right direction. Abstain ourselves from giving a knee-jerk reaction, suspend on our first judgment, pause and take a moment to reflect on the situation and assess it as a whole before we decide to make that comment. And when we decide to comment, take responsibility and be accountable for your actions. And don't hide behind the keyboard and be one of those keyboard warriors who do nothing more than just to invoke negative emotions by fueling fuel to the fire. And if there's anything that we are unsure, we do what is best. We refrain from making unnecessary comments and we research on that issue, because there is a sage advice that says silence is golden. And when we eventually decide and have the courage to ask, we ask with respect and the curiosity to learn, not to take advantage of the knowledge or the situation. The common rhetoric that we have been taught in Singapore is to exercise tolerance, and public discussion on race and religion is not allowed in the public sphere. However, tolerance for me has never been relevant because it does not represent a sincere effort to understand and accept someone to build positive peace and harmony because different faiths and cultures, between different faiths and cultures. Tolerance to me is like a ticking time bomb waiting for the right trigger for it to explode or implode, both of which is equally harmful. But it does not mean that we are not allowed to discuss on issues related to race and religion in our private sphere, between our own friends and classmates. Okay, so as you are going to graduate and start working soon, for the guys who are going to go into NS, I would like to issue a challenge to each and every single one of you. If you do not have a close friend from a different faith or a different ethnicity or culture, please go and find one and be friends with one. Get to know that person really, really well, to the point whereby when your own family members begin to throw negative comments about a particular culture or religion, you know well enough to stand up for it, to make things right. And as how Bill Clinton once said at the Oklahoma bombing memorial service address, let us let our children know that we will stand against the forces of fear. When there is talk of hatred, let us stand up and talk against it. When there is talk of violence, let us stand up and talk against it. Or as how Martin Luther King said in his I Have a Dream address, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And like the both of them, I have a dream and a movement that I want the Singaporean youth to take up. I want you and me to lead this interfaith-intercultural understanding movement, to stand up for what is wrong and to correct them and to encourage others to do the same. I want us to be able to tap into our skills in harnessing the power of social media networks to drive positive change in ourselves and in our society. Because when we begin to take and shoulder this responsibility, we will see that positive change that we want to see. And most of all, I want you to take this challenge up. Because in this globalized and changing world, if you fail to be flexible to adapt to rapid cultural and social changes, while holding on strongly to your beliefs and values, which are the 2 key elements in life that grounds you, there is a high possibility that you will lose yourself. So let me end with 3 of my favorite quotes. The first one is by Mahatma Gandhi. Whenever you are confronted with an opponent, conquer him with love. Second one is from Gautama Buddha. Peace comes from within, do not seek it without. And last but not least, from Martin Luther King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And with that, thank you.